Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to have you joining me here in the room and out in cyberspace and by phone. I was thinking how I would introduce this evening, and I wanted to say that I was particularly psyched up for this episode, this webinar and the series, because I've been working on the topic for quite a long time. And it represents a lot of the evolution of my experience. And I always like to share that. And I thought, well, actually, virtually every webinar I've done has been something to reveal what has been revealed to me very recently. And there's definitely a level of excitement and satisfaction in being able to do that. So although I feel particularly excited about this webinar, in truth, it's in keeping with everything else that I've done, I guess. I chose the topic, well, first of all, because I thought people would be particularly interested in the topic, but secondly, because of a series of experiences that I've had recently that unfolded to me the energetic nature of relationships. And I was able to learn some things about what those energetic connections really were and how we might work with them to do two things. The obvious thing, of course, is to improve our relationships, our connection with people, our openness to people, which is often described as being present with people, being present in the moment, being present in what's happening in your life, and connecting, of course, then not just with people, but indeed with everything that's going on, and feeling the flow of cosmic guidance, of cosmic intelligence as it guides us through our days and weeks and months. It's a marvelous way to function when you can be self-referral. And indeed, it's a delightful, I'm inclined to say trick, but maybe that's not the right word. It's a wonderful state to be in when you can maintain that when things are going on in your life. And particularly when you're in a relationship, and especially particularly, if I can put those two words together, especially particularly when you're in a very intimate relationship. And intimate relationships, of course, include not only those with a significant other, as we usually say that, or these days, some kind of a partner, but also the parenting relationships, the sibling relationships, and other family relationships. All of these things tie together to give us a web of connections that can be exquisitely beautiful and sometimes very trying. The other thing that understanding these connections can give us is a chance to discover where the blocks are, where the tangles are, where the impediments are that keep us from making the connections. I'm going to just pause for a moment. There's things going on. Dick, can you hand me that portable phone right there? And why it's ringing, I don't know. I don't know. That's probably nothing. Okay, things are settling down in the room again, so I'll continue. We're talking about the web of connections and staying in a self-referral state, a state of presence, so that we can navigate that web of connections and really enjoy them to their fullest, to make those relationships truly, truly meaningful. And for many people, this is actually a very challenging thing. And for others, of course, it comes very easily and naturally. So what we're going to do tonight is explore the nature of those connections. And then in the group clearing session that'll come in the latter half of the webinar, we'll actually go in and do some exercises to make connection with a significant other, and that person doesn't need to be in the room. So don't worry if you're not with someone who's really special to you. We'll work with a significant other, and then we'll also do some work on removing the blocks that may exist that keep us from really being present, from showing up in a relationship, and being able to navigate the relationship. I'm going to say something though about the blocks right now. Historically, much attention has been focused on what keeps people from having close relationships. In this work, we don't focus so much on the nature of the blocks. And the reason is that if we do focus on the nature of the blocks, there's a tendency to kind of get involved with those blocks, and to feel like, oh, I've really got to work through this stuff, and I got to understand it, and there's all this emotion and feeling, and I didn't have the right experience when I was a child, and what am I going to do because I didn't have that experience, and so on and so forth, all kinds of reasons. And so in this work, one of the beautiful things is that we just look at the energy, the tangle itself. We don't have to know the details of it, and we just work to untangle it, to fix that energy, if you want to think of it that way, to make it smooth and integrated with our whole energy field, so that we're able to function just naturally and completely spontaneously, and let the blocks just like that just float away gently. Sometimes, of course, we do some specific work that may be necessary, but most of the time we just do it on the level of the energy without focusing on specific meaning. So what's the nature of energetic connection? Whenever we form a bond with somebody, whenever we connect with somebody, there is I'm going to stop for a moment. Traditionally, people talk about a flow of energy between people, and that is true in a way. But what is going on is that our experience of our own space as a person, and this is a subtle experience, and it's often not really conscious as we're engaged in normal activity with people, but our energy space and the energy space of another person merges, and it forms what people often say a shared space. And I thought about that shared space thing quite a bit. And I decided as soon as you say the word shared, you're still talking about two. But the experience really is of one. There's this sense of oneness with someone. And there's you can put that in various terms. But the feeling that you're kind of one organism with two minds and two bodies, and you're functioning in the world, but you're sharing so much that it really is a sense of oneness. And if your perception is open to the very subtle levels, so you can see the energy, you realize that you're in the field because there is only one field. And so one space doesn't just mean, oh, there's now two has become one space, just as we think of, oh, when people are in love, two people are now, they act like they're one. It's actually more than that there's this underlying field. We often say a field of consciousness. Physics describes it as a unified field of natural law. And the result of the merging is that one actually opens and flows into that field, so that the individuality now becomes a level of universality, and anything and anybody in that field, which is everybody, because nobody can be out of that field, anybody in that field experiencing that field as oneness can then connect with anybody and everybody else. And that's really the basis of how I do the energy work that I do. Indeed, I think how all energy healers work, is that you work and locate a person's field, because all information is everywhere. The field is everywhere. It's all pervasive. And so it's only thing that's necessary is just to open up to the field. And then from there, everything just flows naturally, and the connection gets established, and the feeling then is just bliss, because the nature of the experience of the field is bliss. And then in that field, in that transcendent state is the intelligence of nature that guides us so that we fulfill our dharma, our destiny, and work out our karma as it needs to be worked out. And in terms of working that out and learning the lessons that we need to learn, I think the thing that's fair to say is that we can work that karma out in a comfortable way of learning, or we can work it out in a way of like paying a debt in which we're kind of unhappy about the thing. And so a certain choice gets to be made if one is open enough to being able to make a choice, to just experiencing the field and the guidance of the field and living out the dharma that the field has ordained to us. And then we're able to live in bliss and discover and grow in a natural way, because growth is natural. It's inevitable. We're going to grow. The question is whether we're going to grow comfortably or more uncomfortably. And so we can avoid a lot of the pain just by opening to that field. Those of you who have experience with meditation and spiritual practices, and since most of the people who are connected with us, I know, practice transcendental meditation, you're used to experiencing that transcendental field. You're used to contacting that. And then coming into activity, Marcia used to describe it as like dyeing a cloth. You dip into the dye, and then you come out into the sunlight, and you bring the quality of the dye with you when you come. And each time you dip into the dye, you get more and more of the color and more of that, the analogy being for pure consciousness, and you bring that into activity. So that's a relatively straightforward way of gaining that awareness of the transcendental field and of oneself as residing in that field. And so the things that we can do in relationships involve dipping into that field and then recognizing the connection that exists within that field. Because whenever we form a relationship, whether that be a family relationship, a friendship, or a romantic relationship, or even a business relationship, there is a connection formed, and there is a merging of energy fields, so that there is a direct, if you want to think of it again on a physical level, there is a direct connection, but that connection is not something we see with our eyes. We see it with our subtle perception, our subtle sight, and can then evaluate whether that connection is a comfortable one, or perhaps that there's some obstruction, or there's some twisting or turnings, the way I often see it, some sort of knotting of things that keeps the energy from flowing smoothly between the two individuals. And in a family, of course, then you have a whole web again, a whole network of connections, and energy is flowing between all the individuals in the family, and that makes things delightfully complicated. Fortunately, we don't have to solve any kind of mathematical equations to figure it out. We just have to live it and be in the field like that. The thing about being in that field and making connections at that level, or being aware of the connection that is made at that level, while also participating on the surface level of life, it allows you to take everything in a very tender way and just enjoy it. It's like taking a warm bath, and it's just always there for you, and it's easy and it's delightful. And from that level, then we navigate all the day-to-day activity, which often gets to be quite overshadowing if we're not open to that subtle level. And so we tend normally to get kind of caught up in that level of day-to-day activity, and there's less charm there. There's more charm in the deeper levels of connection, very much more charm, until it just basically becomes infinitely charming. And so when shifts from that surface level. Oh, we've got to do this and we're doing that. We have to have lunch and we have to clean up the dishes and we have to straighten up the house and do all these other things that we do when we're getting ready to put on a webinar. Then when that kind of level can get very mundane. But when we're open to that subtle level, then it's all just a joy. We just do it. And then we take pleasure at some level, more surface level in, oh, well, we've got it all accomplished. It looks really nice now. But on the deeper level, it's all just bliss. It's all just joy. I'm going to pause just for a second because I have a question here on the screen, and I'm going to just... Okay, I'll get to that question in just a few minutes. It's a very nice question. Just close that screen there. Okay, so let's think more about the nature of that connection. When I started doing this work, I began to perceive that people were bonded in a sense that was physical, if you will, but it's a subtle physical level. And I was very curious about that. And I was very fortunate to hear Maharishi in a recorded lecture from many years ago make some comment about the nature of relationship and how that bond existed in the transcendental field. And I realized immediately that when I heard that he was describing my experience. And I've done quite a bit of work since then, both in my actual healing work and then in reading and discussing with people who have some experience with this kind of thing, what that connection looked like, how it worked, and what things that we could do to improve the connection, to make it function better. And I've worked out a whole set of approaches, techniques, if you will, for dealing directly with the energetic bond. And as I started to say at the beginning, and it's really important to understand, it's not so necessary to know why there are twists and kinks or blockages in the bond. It's only necessary to see that they're there and then to work on them. And in the group clearing session, we'll actually go through some experience so that you get at least some feeling of what that might look like, how that might show up for you. And it's different for every individual, of course, and every individual's connection with any other significant individual in their life. But the bonds are there, and they can be worked with very, very directly. And so what I was seeing was that there was this bond that existed between people. And when people would start to talk about a relationship, you might say that bond got brighter in my awareness. And I would get that sense, oh, it's working here, but it's not working, in some other aspect. And then would just attend to those parts, put attention on them, straighten out the kinks and improve the flow. I've learned from various sources a whole bunch of techniques for doing these kinds of things. And I'm not going to try to describe exactly how I do it, but only just to say that I have a whole arsenal of approaches. I don't like the word arsenal. I have a toolbox. I have a toolbox of of techniques. Is that better? Yeah. Cornucopia, yeah. I feel like it's a cornucopia, and the reason I say that is it has no end. It's like, a cornucopia is like a snail shell, and it curls, and it just keeps spiraling around and spiraling around. It seems not to have an end to it. And in doing this work, more and more just keeps opening up for whatever the needs of the person that I'm working with are at that particular time. So I'm not bound by any particular set of tools that I might have. And it's like I can only do this, or I have to follow any kind of particular protocol for doing it. I do what needs to be done at the time with the tools that are offered to me at the time. And new tools keep emerging, and that makes it very, very much fun. I might just comment that a little while ago, I was given a set of stones. Most of them are round, and they're just spheres, polished. And I, for the first time, really connected with the energies of those stones and saw what they could do for people. And so I have a nice set of them, which I have arranged on a table. It's a circular table, and they're actually laid out in a hexagon. Um, and there's actually 12 of them. There's actually 14 of them. One's in the middle, and then one is a special one that is used as a kind of pointer to increase the energy of the others that I'm using at the particular time. And so I use these stones a lot in terms of working with people's relationships, that are something of an issue for any particular person. So that's just one of the new tools that I've had. And it seems like new tools come along, fairly frequently and in a way that's very, very satisfying. And I should just mention again, because not everybody is aware perhaps, that while many healers usually went through some tremendous crisis, either a big emotional crisis or a health crisis, and then they kind of came out of that with a big download of information and techniques and things that they could do. But I got mine the old-fashioned way. It comes bit by bit and develops slowly over time, so that I have a very deep appreciation and insight into what each of the various tools that I receive can be used for, and then just add them to my toolkit, my cornucopia of tools that I have available to help people in their relationships. So I think I'll stop there, see if there are any questions. Those of you out in cyberspace, feel free to use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer. If you're on a smartphone, it's also at the bottom of your screen, I'm understanding, although I've never actually done it. But I think you tap the bottom of your screen, you'll get the little toolbar, tap on Q&A, or you can use the chat function, that'll work too. And then I will receive your indication here that you have something, and then I can actually figure it out tonight how to get to allow people to speak when they're out there in cyberspace. I knew it could be done. I just had never figured it out. So are there any, I'm going to just click here one more time because I'm going to answer this question if there's no other questions have popped up. So the question was, what if I don't really have a significant relationship in my life, and that I basically function on my own and really don't have a significant other and don't even have family? And the answer to that question is we all come from somewhere, and that somewhere, meaning parents, have some bond with us. Mom always has a strong bond. Dad certainly can have a strong bond. And even if they are no longer incarnate, excuse me, there is still a connection with those who have been significant in our lives. And don't forget, we have bonds with teachers, certainly with friends, sometimes with other kinds of people like clergymen, business associates, all those kind of people. So when we do the exercise in a little bit, if you want to, you can just remember somebody who has been significant in your life. And you'll find that this actually works very, very nicely, even if you don't currently have a person in your life that you're relating to. So yeah, I have a question. Okay, we'll take a question and then we'll go into the exercise.
Do you treat couples? Have you in the past? Both of them at the same time? And could you give some examples of how you, like a couple of examples?
The question is, have I treated couples, two people simultaneously? And the answer is yes, I have done that, and it's a great joy. I love working with more than one person at a time. And they do not necessarily have to be present in the room at the same time, but it's better that way simply because I can work with one and the other to get them both in the process of deepening their connection. But it can be done when somebody is not in the room or even nearby. Um, and um, the effect still takes place. And that is because we're all in this web of connection. We're all in the field. And so all the intelligence is everywhere. And so wherever we might, where we tend to think of we're here in a space, right? Because that's where our body is, but we're really unbounded beings. And so wherever we interact in the physical sense, we interact with the whole field simultaneously. And particularly when we're working on the energetic level, we have that direct effect. And so the whole field ripples with whatever new vibration that we may bring to the situation. And as far as explaining that, I'll do that in the group clearing part of the session. We'll actually go to work on that. So looks like we're ready to move on. Anybody waving a hand or whatever? Good. So I'm going to stop this recording and thank all of you for participating so far. And we have these group clearing portions, the second half of the webinar each month. And in those group clearing sessions, we do individual work collectively. We work on the whole group and on each person who is participating. And we get to, in this case, we're actually going to learn how to do a connection exercise so that we can deepen our connections with other people. Okay, then we'll say goodbye to the people out there, not the ones who are actually on the webinar, but the people who will be watching this on YouTube later.